think the biggest issue with a lot of agents themselves, it's what's happening between the ears. They talk themselves out of doing it. Remember, we talked about the journey. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just be more consistent than you are perfect.
The cool thing about being able to do storytelling, right? Because you even said this earlier, being a homeowner and an investor, right? You're able to share stories about experiences so that when someone's scared about something, you could be like, well, I was in that same position too, but then I did X, Y, and Z. So your depth of knowledge is much more. You're able to connect to them on another level as well. What are some things that you see that if someone wanted to emulate what you're doing, that they do incorrectly, that they should actually be pivoting?
I think not really understanding the importance of what they put out on social platforms. Transparency is so key. If you're able to, like as a new agent, not new, but newer agents, oftentimes they think they need to look like $1 million listing, or they need to do that and need to show the most glamorous property. What would resonate more on both a local and national level is to show that you're starting with rentals and you're learning that grind. You're now embarking on your first sale that may be $600,000-$700,000, and contingent on your market, that's a big number. And whomever you're selling, and just keeping in mind whether you're working with a buyer or seller, that's going to be more times than not their biggest purchase. Mm-hmm. So treating that property and treating that transaction that way. And to get back to my point initially, is also, showing your journey of going through the process of, if you didn't get a listing, that's okay. Share how and why you didn't, and what did you learn from it, and how can you learn from it? And understand that you don't have to have the 10, 15, $20 million property right away. Show what you have now, and you'll get more people and get more followers because they'll see you grow to that your first $1 million listing or your first 5 or 10 or whatever it is. So don't feel necessary that whole notion of fake it till you make it. I think the transparency will help you make it faster, quite frankly, than faking it and then hoping that you land in the right place and get the right opportunity.
Yeah. I think it's so true. So many people spend time trying to build themselves up instead of just, I've always wanted to just do like a whole segment on just like, here's 10 things I did wrong, right? I went on this appointment and I didn't pre-qualify and I didn't get the listing. Or I went on this appointment and I didn't ask if they were interviewing other agents, and turns out they interviewed somebody an hour before me and they signed with them, and by the time I showed up, they weren't even ready. They were already signed with somebody else. Yeah. Right. Just showing more of like the vulnerable side of like, here's some things I did wrong, so you can learn from it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a topic that came up just recently was you can't time the market. It's your time in the market that counts. And it's like you can't time the content that you're going to produce based on the circumstances that you're in. It's how consistent and you're being front of mind, more or less, right? It's like your time developing it versus tracking when's the good time for you to be seen at your highest peak or whatever the case it is. We have an inside joke almost where whenever we interview agents and they say, I want to be like one of those people on $1 million listings. We're like, it's one of those. Like they're going to be out in a week because once they start hustling, they're like, fuck, this is not what I thought it was at all.
Right.
But that's the struggle overall is people don't want to do the work that it takes, and creating that content, being a creative, trying to reach and do storytelling is super hard for me. And I think we would both be in that category that we think it's harder than actually making cold calls or prospecting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So somebody who's like an old dog now, not a new person, what's some things that they can do to implement to be able to do storytelling, marketing the way that you do for their clients, for their own personal brand as well?
I think what's important is to, number one, be on the pulse of what's happening in the market. And, right now, many people will think, well, there's really no need for agents because, they can represent themselves, buyers. I'm speaking to buyers right now. They can represent themselves, or, they have access to, locally your MLS, or here in New York, Streezy, or whatever, Zillow, whatever other platform. But there's so much information that it's almost sensory overload because they have to determine what really resonates with them in their market. Yeah. So what I would say for someone that's just starting to come in, look at articles that are there and things that are happening right now, and then try to interpret that to your market and to whomever your consumer is. I know one thing that I did most recently, I first of all, I read everything every day, every morning. I'm reading The Real Deal. I'm reading a local, the Brownstoner. I read New York Post. I read Global Mansion. I'll read Curbed. I read, 6 to 7 things I read every day. So, I saw something on TMZ that spoke to a Black couple in California that recently had their home, they did an appraisal and their home came undervalued. They then brought in someone white to appraise it, and they came up $485,000 more. And then they end up suing the appraisal company, and they won. So I then saw that article. I spoke about that. I talked, what can you do in that, if you're in that case scenario? Obviously, lean on a real estate broker to give you accurate comps. Reach out to the appraiser, ask for them to do another appraisal, contest the appraisal if need be. And then lastly, you have your Fair Housing Association, local Fair Housing Association, speak to them. And then if need be, you can sue, you can look to sue in litigation against that appraisal company. But those type of things, that's good content because there's going to be someone in that scenario, And then now, obviously, we see the SVB that fell apart, Signature Bank that fell apart, and a lot of buyers are nervous by that, rightfully so. But if you have less than $250,000 in the bank, that really doesn't impact you. Right. Your money is covered by the FDIC, so don't get all up in an uproar about that because it doesn't really impact you. But the silver lining to that is that rates dropped because of this, and so that impacts you. So, just trying to really find, if you really hitting your head against the wall, like, what do I talk about? What do I do? Just take a step back and think of what the consumer is seeing, and you interpret that to them to either calm them or tell them, this isn't a good time because of X, Y, Z. Yeah. So that I do that coupled with other good content.
There's one thing that comes to mind. It's, as you were talking about it, I was feeling an emotional trigger by some of the things you were saying, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. So you're really good at doing that.
Well, that topic, in specific, is great for so many different reasons, right? We all, as agents, agent to agent, we all bitch and complain about appraisal issues all the time, right? And, the appraiser screwed it up. The appraiser didn't look at the right comps. The appraiser's not from my area. The appraiser's, really from Brooklyn. And we need a guy who's, knows Tribeca. Then you bring the whole race card into it, right? That makes things controversial. And I'm sure your comments on that post were through the roof.
Yeah.
And then, then there's the age-old question that a lot of agents discuss on different platforms is like, well, what happens if the appraisal comes in low? Do I appeal it? Do I get another appraisal? Could I have prevented this by giving the appraiser comparables? So I think that's a great topic. So I think it's just, people, you could go in a lot of different directions here. I think people who don't do content every day struggle to find topics like that. I think some people, I'm just trying to think of issues that newer agents have, right? Some people might think of the topic, but they just, are uncreative enough to actually come up with the material.
Yeah. But the skill that, Jeffrey, what you've done is almost in a fearful market, people, the first thing that goes is trust. Yeah. Trust in the people that they're working with and trust in the market. You took a controversial piece that I saw that piece on there, right? It's like they had the African head on one of the house. It was like a picture in there. It's like you see like some tribal like things all around and you're like, that's fucked up. But then what you did is you turned it into a piece that you would talk about advice so someone can see you as a trusted advisor, right? Instead of someone who's just spreading it, right?
Right.
And then the same thing with the rates, right? When you're talking about, there is a lot of fear there, but let's look at what we can control, right? So it's like being a calming force, trying to be in a place where you can say, hey, let's focus on what we can do, and let's look at this piece of advice. So then you gain trust in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, along those lines, I think it's important. We're talking about content right now. The biggest issue across the board are rates. And that's on both sides of the transaction, whether you be, a seller, if you're like, well, what am I going to move to? Am I going to get this type of rate? Like there's new talks of accidental landlords now because you're not going to find that 3% rate anymore. And then you have buyers who are, paralyzed because they don't want to go, they don't know what to do because the rates are so low. So now if you want content, let's talk about what's the creative way to go around these rates. Number one, you could, educate about buying down the rate. And what's the cost of buying down a rate, if that's one thing. If you're on the seller side and you have the wherewithal, consider seller financing. That's another option. If you're aligned with mortgage brokers, do some content with a mortgage broker and they can talk about the different products that they offer, whether it be the great interest only for right now and then you refi once the rates drop, or various ARMs. 15-year right now, that rate, is less than a 30, what that rate is. So you have to come up with creative ideas. Yeah, we're in a challenging market of sorts, but what are you going to do? And if you want content, explain what you're going to do and have someone there. And even if you aren't that knowledgeable, have someone there and showcase them. You mean to tell me a mortgage broker wouldn't want to get on social and talk about what they have to offer? They'd love to do that. Yeah. So lean on them and let them be the expert until you feel comfortable to talk about, a certain subject matter. So it's just a matter of, this is the time, and in these times right now as agents, this is when the cream's going to rise to the crop. If you are unable to find a way to separate yourself from everyone else right now, you're not going to be in this business, because realistically, we may be this way for like another year, maybe a year and a half. So what are you going to do right now? How are you going to sustain? And this is when it's not easy right now, but this is when the best in the market, they're going to gain more market share, because there are going to be less people around.
Yeah.
So that, and that's one way of looking at it. Some people look at it as a down market. I think it is a great way to gain more market share.
Yeah.
I think it's just like repurposing things too, right? Like, not to go back to the topic you were talking about, but the appraisal topic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you said you saw that on TMZ.
Yeah.
So you saw it on TMZ. Odds are TMZ stole it from somebody else, right?
Right.
TMZ repackaged it. You then repackaged it. And now I'm sure somebody's seen your video and has repackaged that 2 more times. So I think people have to realize it's not that complicated, right?
It really isn't.
Just like we're going to repurpose this episode into short form, into Instagram Reels, into YouTube Shorts. We may ask you to rejoin us for a webinar. There's all sorts of it's just repackaging the same sort of material, but put your own spin on it.
Yeah.
Right.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think the biggest issue with a lot of agents themselves, it's what's happening between the ears. They talk themselves out of doing it.
Yeah.
The production isn't great, or this. In this day and age with phones, get your phone and just do it right in front of your phone. That one post we talked about with the appraising, I just did a green screen. I grabbed a capture of the article, did a green screen on it, and just spoke right into the phone. What's so difficult about that? And then you want it to be perfect. Remember, we talked about the journey. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Yep.
Just be more consistent than you are perfect. You'll end up becoming perfect with more. It's just like sport. I always like to do sports analogies. You gotta get a lot of at bats. But when you're at the plate, you gotta swing. Keep swinging. You may strike out, and don't expect the first time you hit the ball is gonna be a home run or something. Yeah. Just get a couple of easy singles. Maybe if you even need to bunt. Yeah. Just bunt to get yourself on base, just get on. And then the confidence will improve, and the content will get better, and the production will get better.
Yeah. We're our own biggest critic too, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Most people don't post the video or don't post the content they create because they don't like how they look, or they don't like their lighting, or the production sucks, or the audio is not good, right? But even if you get past all that and you do like it, you're going to hate it in 6 months anyway, right? Because whatever you're doing in 6 months is going to be better. It's going to be better audio, better video, better content, better editing. So no matter what, you're not going to if I go back on my own Instagram feed or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or our YouTube, our initial podcast, the first 10 episodes, I'm
drunk.
Oh God. Yeah. The first 10 I couldn't do without having a couple drinks, because I was nervous about what we were going to say and all that stuff. So you're not going to like the first stuff that you put out no matter what. Yeah. So just put it out.
Right. Absolutely.